Now that we have pickups for our game, let's design a quick GUI for it. This episode will be a 101 course on simple GUIs in Unreal Engine 4. Since we're using the third-person template, we don't need to worry about creating too many custom HUD classes, just one. However, we will be using it, so I'm going to quickly go over the differences between UMG, HUDs, and GUIs before we get started. First, let me introduce myself. Insomnia from UnrealTek, division of Blender Tech, and welcome to another video. If you enjoy it or learn something, consider liking and subscribing for more Unreal, Blender, coding, and all sorts of other CG related videos. Lastly, don't forget our motto, create your way. So let's jump right in. UMG simply stands for Unreal Motion Graphics. It's their way of creating GUIs within a game, similar to Unity's Canvas system that came out in Unity 4. A GUI, as you might expect, is a graphical user interface. So that's all the text you might see in a game, your mini-map, your health bar, stuff like that. Lastly, a HUD. A HUD is heads-up display. So that is a type of blueprint that actually displays that GUI. So by default, if you go Window, World Settings, under that tab, it'll show you the game mode that you have set up for this level. And in this level, we have third-person game mode. If we go to selected game mode and expand it, our HUD class is HUD. Now, we don't have a HUD class, so we need to create one. So under Blueprints, I've already went ahead and create a HUD called our game's HUD. So to do that, just right-click, Blueprint Class. Under all classes, search HUD. Select it, and then you can type in our game's HUD. And that creates a HUD class blueprint. Once you've done that, you can go back over to the world settings and you can choose it under the game mode, and that'll override it. Now that on its own does nothing. We need something to display. Now that is a widget. And now I've gone ahead and created one called main GUI. So to create a widget, what you do is you right click, user interface, widget blueprint, then you give it a name, and then it's ready to use. Now when you open a widget blueprint, it gives you this screen, a designer tab, and it'll be completely blank. So what this allows you to do, as you can see, I've set some up already. It allows you to put text, it allows you to put progress bars, it allows you to make images, it allows you to do anything GUI based in a nice canvas-based system. However, you also have this graph tab where you can go ahead and create logic for your GUI elements, which we'll be getting into very quickly. So that's the difference between the three. UMG is just a name for GUIs in Unreal, basically. HUD is what creates and displays your GUI, and a widget is one or more visual elements that the HUD will be displaying on the screen that you will be actually creating visually. So let's go ahead and create our GUI first. So opening up the main GUI widget class, what I've done is I've gone and created this setup here. So let me show you how to recreate it. All I've done was under grid panel, which is my favorite. You can read it. It evenly divides all available space between all of its children. It can have as many children as possible. I drug it into the scene, and then what I did was I took horizontal box, and so that lets things go horizontally. As you can see, we have these all horizontal. So these are horizontal boxes within a grid panel. So I drug 4 of those in, one for each type of pickup. Now it seems like it's not doing a lot, so what you need to do is select your grid panel and then hit size to content. Now it gets even smaller, but that's because we have nothing in there. So what I then did was take text under common and drag it on top of one of the horizontal boxes. You'll instantly see it show up. And then do the same for the other 4. And if we expand those, we can see each one has a text block under its hierarchy now. But we only see one. Why is that? That's because a grid panel works on rows and columns. So you can see our first horizontal box is row 0, column 0. Same with the second one. So what you need to do is use the arrows or type in the values and move each one down accordingly. And then what I did was in my horizontal boxes, I simply added another text element to them. You'll see it comes out right beside it. And then I just typed in a random number. Under appearance, I just gave it a little bit of color. And that was basically it for all 4 of them. So hopefully that explains it well enough. If not, I can create a small mini series on this. Just let me know. So with that created though, we don't have anything to see yet. If we play our game, it doesn't show up. Why is that? Well, because we have no logic to show it. We do that in our HUD class. Remember, our HUD shows our GUI, our widgets. So what we do is opening our HUD class. So under blueprints, we have our game's HUD, which is of course set in our game mode under world settings. So we open up our game's HUD. Now we have a special event receive draw HUD. This is only for the HUD class blueprint. This allows you to do some basic things. If I drag off this with context sensitive on, you'll see it allows me to do some very basic drawing. If I expand HUD, you can see I can add a line, a material, a rectangle, text, or a texture. So for example, if I was to draw a text, I could give it coordinates, say 50 and 50. And I could type in ABC blah 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 blah, compile, save, play, and now it prints it. Now what you need to know about event receive draw HUD is this is like an event tick for HUDs. It does this every single frame. It draws the HUD. So just something to be aware of. Otherwise everything is the same as a regular blueprint. Now how do we show our GUI, however? There was no option to show a widget under that. To do that, what we do is under event begin play or somewhere else, but I like it to be shown right at the start of the game when it's a main GUI like that. We type in create widget. You'll see it says construct none. We want to choose our widget class, so that's main GUI. We need an owning player, so drag off that and type in get player controller, so that's us. Remember we went over that before. And then return value. So that's the spawned object, that's the widget that it's creating, adding to memory. You want to add it to viewport, add to viewport. Now you won't see this by stock. So what you need to do is uncheck context sensitive and you'll see it's there. Or a fancy way is just take return value, drag off, and then type in add to viewport and it'll automatically connect it for you. So you can think of this, what happens is when the game starts using this HUD class, it creates our GUI, it creates our GUI widget and then adds it to the screen. As simple as that. And if you want to remove a widget, what you do is you type remove from parent. Again, context sensitive off, and the target would be, again, the created widget. So if we did it like this, it would quickly add it to the screen and then it would remove it. You wouldn't even see it. But that gives you an idea of how to create, say, pop-up boxes and dialog boxes and such. So now, if we do that, like that, hit compile and save, and hit play, we now see our what we've created more or less. So now how do we get it to show up so that when one of our pickups is used and the way that we created to use them, it adds to the numbers. It goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many we have. There's many ways to do this. And what it's going to require is communicating between blueprints. We need to communicate from each of the 4 pickups, from each of those, to our HUD class. So we communicate to that. And then we need to communicate to our widget to change the text. And then it'll finally show up on our screen going back to our HUD. But that step you don't need to worry about. So we need to start off with our pickup. So let's open up our overlapping pickup base child standard. Let's open it up in the blueprint editor, edit pickup base child standard. And so remember, this was just placeholder logic. We know that this works our pickup little text that it shows. So we can uncheck print to screen, so it just prints to log, so that won't show up on the screen anymore. We still want it to destroy itself when we overlap, but we need to add some extra logic. What we want to do, up top, let's type in event begin play. So that's when the game is started, or when this is spawned somewhere, if you want to spawn it procedurally. Drag off that, type cast to HUD, and choose our game HUD. Now casting, if you're not a programmer, basically takes one thing and turns it into another. So we can't just go in here and choose something and play with it. What we need to do is we need an object to cast to our game HUD. And what we want to cast to our game HUD is our HUD for our player, if that makes any sense. So to do that, drag off of object, type in get HUD. Now it won't show up, turn off context sensitive, get HUD under the HUD class category, and then it's looking for a player controller reference, so that's us playing. So drag off the target and type in get player controller, context sensitive on. And then, as our game's HUD, right click and hit promote to variable. And then just go ahead and call that our game HUD. So that's a reference variable to the HUD now. As you can see, the variable type is our game HUD. And so all this does is it allows for easy reuse. Allows for easy reuse when you promote a casted variable. Otherwise, you could just drag right off of there to do something. But I like to promote it to a variable so that it's nice and clean. So now we can communicate to the HUD. So if we go to our HUD blueprint, we need something to collect the number of pickups that we've picked up. So I went ahead and created some integer variables, one for overlapping, one for clickable, one for moving, and one for highlightable, all with a default value of 0. So what we want to do, now that we've casted, we have access to all of these. So if we go back to our pickup base child standard, our overlapping pickup, now what we can do is destroy this string by holding Alt and clicking on it. Drag in our game's HUD and choose get, make a getter for it. So now we have a reference to it. Go off of it and type in get overlapped pickups value. So this is a variable I've created. I'm going to go back to our game's HUD, so our HUD blueprint. All I did was I created a variable called overlapped pickups value. And I just created it as an integer, and then I compiled. I did one for all 4 of them, as you can see, overlap, clickable, moving, and highlighted. So make sure you do that for all 4 first. So our target is our game HUD, the cast that we did, and then we get the variable from it, overlap pickups value, and we want to set that. What do we want to set it to? Well, when we overlap, we want it to set it to +1. We want to increment it in programming terms. We want to set it to its value +1. We want to add 1. So to do that, what I've done is I've created another variable in this blueprint called pickupped, and it's an integer as well. I'm going to drag that in. I'm going to set it. And so when we overlap, we're going to connect this up. When we overlap, we're going to set overlapped to drag in pickupped again, sorry, not overlap, pickup, get pickupped again, and get it, and then off of pickupped, drag off and type the plus sign. We want an integer plus an integer +1, so this is an incrementer, and then drag that value into the beginning of pickup. So this will set pickup to whatever value it is +1, so it increments it. And then what we can do is, sorry, we didn't want to get off of our game's HUD. We want to drag off of it and set overlap pickups value, or whatever you named your variable for the overlap pickups. We want to set it. We'll drag the execution pins first. We want to set it to that same value. Now you could use a getter, you could drag it in and get it again and then connect it. Or you can just drag straight across in this case. So it's going to set it to its value +1 in, and then on the out, it's going to send it over to our HUDs blueprint variable. It's communicating with these two nodes right here. It's communicating. And then lastly, we want to destroy the actor. So let's compile and save. So now on our HUD, now whenever we overlap one, our overlap pickups value will go up by 1. But what can we do with that? Well, not a heck of a lot. We need to communicate with our GUI. So quickly what we want to do is under our GUI, go to the graph, on event construct. Now what event construct is, it's just like event begin play, so it's like event begin play on a standard blueprint, except it's whenever this GUI is constructed, whether it's a pop-up window, it would be when it's constructed, whether it's when you start the game or a new level, that's when it's constructed. You can also do begin play, but you see it instantly tries to take you to event construct. So that is event begin play for widgets. So what we want to do is we want to cast again. So we want to cast to the HUD. So same thing that we just did. In fact, I'm going to go right over and I'm just going to copy that. I'm just going to copy that except for the event begin play. Copy it and I'm going to paste it into our GUI class. So on event begin play, event construct, we cast to our game HUD. And what are we casting into it? We're casting our player controller's HUD into our HUD. But now this one's grayed out because we didn't create that variable. So all we need to do is just hit right click and hit create variable our game HUD. If that doesn't work for you, you can just do again, you can just right click on its circle and hit promote to variable our game's HUD. And it's available for you right there. So same as before. So now we have access to all those variables. So now what we need to do is go back to our designer, and that's for our overlapping pickups. So that's overlapping pickups. It doesn't matter what you put in for text for that number, it's going to get changed. So what we want to do, let me clear this. So select the number that we want to change, and you have this bind here. And so what that allows you to do is it allows you to bind a function, bind logic to that text. So we want to hit bind and create binding. And so that gives you a getText0 function. You'll see it's a function under our functions called getText0. Now I've already created one of these for each of them. I've got a clickable pickups, a highlightable pickup, a clickable, a highlightable, an overlapping, and a moving, one for each. So create one for each by just selecting the number, hit create binding, and then just rename your function to something like overlapped pickups count or something that you'll recognize. So I'm going to go ahead and I've already created mine, so I'm just simply going to select the binding I'm just going to go ahead and select the bindings I've already created. So for overlapping is overlapping, for highlightable is highlightable, clickable is clickable, and moving is moving. So now we can access those variables. So back in the graph, let's go to our overlapping pickups value. And what we want to do is drag in our game's HUD. So remember, this is a reference variable. We want to make a getter, drag off of it. We want to get this time. We don't want to set. We want to get overlapped. Context sensitive on will help. Get overlap pickups value. So this way we get whatever value it currently has, and we'll just drag that straight into the return value, and it'll cast it from an integer to a text variable type. Hit compile and save. We'll save the whole project to be safe. And now if we hit play, When we overlap it, it changes from 0 to 1. If we went and we duplicated that, so I'm just going to copy and paste it and move it forward, maybe up a little bit. If we hit play, we now have 1, but it doesn't go up again. Why not? That's because of the way we set up our logic. We actually don't want it this way. What we want to do is get rid of the local one we've created. So delete the pickup variable inside of this blueprint. We want to set overlap pickups value, that's the one in the HUD, to itself plus 1. You'll notice it worked fine for 1, but not for 2. So what we want to do is we want to drag off of our game HUD variable reference again, and type get overlap pickups value again, or whatever you called it, context sensitive helps. We want to get that one we want to go plus integer plus 1, and then we want to drag that into its input. So now it'll set it in just the HUD, and it doesn't matter what's going on in this blueprint. So now if we compile and save and play, now we get 1 and 2, just like that. So now you can just do that for the rest of them, but they're all a little bit different. So let's move on to the next one. That one's done. Compile, save your project. Let's do the clickable next. So go into clickable, edit the blueprint. Remember, this is just placeholder logic. So the same thing. On event begin play, we want to cast to the HUD. So again, I'm going to just go and find the one I already made, and I'm going to copy and paste it to save time. So paste it right into our clickable one. We already have a player controller node there. We can just tie it right into there. And then we want to cast. And then it's grayed out again, so we want to right click up here and hit create variable, and it's done deal. Now remember, this is just placeholder for future logic. So we can delete those. We can delete the comment box. So we still want it to destroy when it's clicked, but on clicked we want to do what we did with the overlapped. We want to drag out our game's HUD, get, and off of that we want to get clickable value, and we also want to set clickable value. So, and then remember, off of this one we want to type in plus integer plus 1, so we're incrementing it each time. And then we want to, our setting is our main logic, so we set, so on click we set it to clickable value plus 1, so take the output, the return value, and put it into the input, and then the execution goes on, and then it destroys actor. So remember, you can think of this like this is in this HUD, or sorry, this is in this blueprint, this is in this blueprint, not BPO, BP, but you can think of these ones like communication. You're communicating to the HUD blueprint. So that's how you can think of that, like two completely different blueprints that you're working on in the same blueprint. You're communicating. So let's see if that works. Compile and save. We'll go to our GUI. Remember, we need to create the logic for it. So this is for clickable, so 0, 0, 0. If you haven't already done it, choose bind and hit create binding. I've already created one called clickable pickups value. So what I want to do is I want to drag in our game's HUD reference. I want to get clickable value, and then I just want to drag it right into the return value, and again it'll cast an integer to text. So let's compile and save and hit play. Let's test it. Let's click on it, and it changes to 1. Let's create a second and make sure it works for 2. I'm going to copy it and paste it. In fact, I'm going to do that for all of them, just so I don't have to do it later. So I click on 1, it goes to 1. I click on 2, it goes to 2. I've overlapped this one, it goes to 1. I overlap that one, it goes to 2. So let's continue. So onto the highlightable. So we know that when we mouse over it, it turns green. And we have the cursor on and off debug text. So let's open that one up. We can close the clickable. We know that one works. Save our project to be safe. So choose our highlightable one and edit it. Go into its blueprint. And so this one gets exactly the same treatment. The mouse over logic, it stays. If you don't want that message display, you can uncheck print to screen, or you can delete it altogether. But what we need to do is on event begin play, we need to cast again. So again, I'm just going to select the one that I already made, copy it, paste it right in there. And then we need to create this variable or promote it, whatever your preference. Now, remember that this is just, clicked me was just placeholder logic. So on clicked, exact same thing. All we need to do is just drag in our game's HUD. We want to get highlightable value. I called it highlighted. And then we also want to drag off and set highlighted value. We'll connect these together. So on clicked, it'll set its value, then it'll destroy itself. So again, we want to hit plus, we want to increment +1 every time, and then put the return value into the input. Compile and save, go to our GUI widget, go to our highlightable pickups, same deal, our game's HUD, drag off, getter. And remember, you can always hold down Control and drag in to make a getter, and click with Alt to make a setter. So I'm going to make a getter. I'm going to drag off of there. I'm going to get highlighted value, and drag it right into the return value, and it'll cast it. Compile and save. Save our project to be safe. Close out the highlighted one. And we'll open up the last one, the moving blueprint. Or the moving pickup blueprint, sorry. So, it works the same way. On clicked, we have placeholder logic, destroy actor. So we need to do the exact same thing. We need our cast. So our cast to HUD, again, just copy. And we need to paste it into the end of event begin play. But remember, we created this funny little loop, so we'll just place it in the beginning. And don't forget to promote this to a variable by right-clicking on it, or right-click on the node and hit create variable. And then we want to remove print string clicked me, our placeholder logic, and replace it with the same one. Our getter, get, this one's moving, so get moving value and set moving value. And the same thing as before, we want to increment it by 1, so plus integer plus 1. So increment by 1, return value into the input of the setter, and done deal. Now go back into our GUI, go to moving, and the same thing. We want a getter for our HUD, and we want to get moving value and drag it right in. Now compile and save our project to be safe. Close our moving one, we don't need it. Now let's test them all out. So they're all 0. Let's try our overlapping first. 1 and 2. Now let's try our clicking. 1 and 2. Now let's try our highlightable clicking. 1 and 2. Now let's try our moving ones if I can get them. 1 and 2. Just like that. So that's pretty boring though. Let's quickly add a score system, make it a little more interesting. So in our GUI, let's go back to the designer. Let's drag in a horizontal box somewhere. Let's check off size to content, as I always suggest. Let's drag some text into it. And let's call this score : space. And then let's drag some more text in. You can't drag it right into it, so you'll have to drag onto the horizontal box in your layout. What I like to do is, for example, the horizontal box I just drug in, I like to give it a name. Horizontal box 367 doesn't really tell me much. I like to call it something like horizontal box score. So score, and then our score will be 0000, whatever. Maybe we'll add one more text box on top there, and then we'll call it points. And we'll give this some color. We'll make it say red, and we'll create a binding. So the text bind, create binding. We'll call this one score value text. So what can we do with this? Well, this is where we can get a little interesting. So let's create some logic. So let's drag in a getter for our game HUD, and off of it let's get a getter for each one of our pickups. So get clickable, get overlapping, get moving, and get highlightable. Now remember, these are integers, so they're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. But let's assign a point value to each of these. So how about let's decide that overlapping is the easiest since you just walk over it. So let's say it's worth 10 points. The moving's the hardest, so let's say it's worth 100 points. Highlighted, let's say it's worth 25. And the same with clickable, since it's basically the same thing. We'll call it 25. So how do we get these points into our return node? Clickable value, we type in the asterisk for multiplication, integer times integer, so we want to take that value times 25. Do the same for the rest of them, times their point values. And then we want to add them all together. So take the return value of the first one, type in the plus sign, integer plus integer, and then add 3 pins. So 1, 2. So we have 3 extra pins, and just drag everyone in. It's a little bit messy, but it works. So we have all of this added together. It gets all of the values. It multiplies them by their point value. So we get base values. This is our reference to HUD for communication. Then we multiply by their point values. And then we add it all together. And then just like the rest, we just connect it to the return value. So let's see how that works. Compile, save our whole project to be safe, hit play. We now have a score system. Now when we overlap, we get 10, 20, we get 45, 70, 95, 120, and 220, and 320. So a basic point system. So it's as easy as that. You can set up an entire game based on pickups just like that. So that's a very, very simple setup, but that is how you create basic GUIs for your game. And that is the end of the lesson for today. So if you have any requests for some more detailed information about stuff we went over, please let me know. In the next lesson, we're going to create a timer for our player to have a certain amount of time to collect a certain amount of pickups and get the highest score possible. And we're going to create a game over screen when that happens, as well as a start screen. But we'll get to that in the next lesson. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching again from the team here at UnrealTek, a division of BlenderTech.com. If you enjoyed this video and learned something, please like it and don't forget to subscribe for more videos. We're on social media on the links on your screen. If you disliked this video for some reason, please tell us why so we can continually improve our videos based on your community input. We also take requests, so we'll see you next time. Remember, create your